When it comes to the American War for Independence, New Jersey is often overshadowed by events in Philadelphia, Boston, Lexington, and Concord, and when we are recognized, it's typically limited to the Battle of Trenton. And that's fair enough. But as the setting for over 600 skirmishes, battles, and other acts of war, New Jersey is no slouch when it comes to Revolutionary War history. So, while everyone else remembers Valley Forge for the awful attrition rates suffered by Washington's army, it's a shame that Morristown gets no credit for keeping more soldiers alive, despite an objectively harsher winter. You're welcome, America. And my home turf deserves more recognition than sucker punching a bunch of Germans on Christmas. Thus, today, we will investigate one of the earliest actions of the war, a month before the Declaration of Independence would be signed, and proving once again that Wildwood is dangerous no matter what century it is. The Battle of Turtle Gut Inlet. Welcome to Words and Coffee, where we talk interesting history about the Garden State and showcase a bag of small batch roasted goodness. Today's brew is Dark Depths by Expedition Roasters. Is that great bag art? Look at that. And the history is the 1776 battle, Blockade Run, and subsequent scuttling of the brigantine Nancy. Let's get to it. Let me set the scene for you. The Continental Army under General George Washington was established about 12 months ago, and about 3 months following that, the Navy. It's early in the war, and they are not having a good time of it. All throughout late 1775 and early 1776, the Continental Army was working through some teachable moments and growing pains as things escalated from what were essentially acts of vandalism into organized kinetic action. And what's interesting to note is that when the Brits still considered the War for Independence kind of a Portland Chaz Garden situation and not a genuine secession, they were still willing to sell gunpowder to the colonies. And in 74 to 75, the Army was able to acquire 40 tons of the stuff. Of course, once it became obvious that we were aiming a little higher than teabagging Boston Harbor, they shut the spigot off real quick. That didn't stop the Americans from, liberating British armories. After all, without gunpowder, a formation is just a parade. And with them burning through their finite stash, literally to the tune of tens of thousands of pounds over the course of the early campaigns, the army needed a new source. Now, if there's one thing the French like more than croissants and berets, it's sticking their thumb in England's eye. They gladly sold the rebellious colonies as much as they could want. And since Jeff Bezos had yet to be born and the colonies lacked Amazon Prime, the trick was getting it there. Here's where our story comes in. The exchange was often made in Jack Sparrow's old stomping grounds, the Caribbean. Continental Navy ships would pick up cargo, sail back past Cape May to make the delivery in Philadelphia. And Philadelphia continues using gunpowder to this day. Of course, the Brits soon got wise to this and took steps to blockade Delaware Bay, but that didn't stop the Navy from trying. It was early June 1776, and because the Jersey Shore wasn't yet a thing, a ship named the Nancy was at the port of St. Thomas. Crewed by 11 men and 6 cannons, she was small by the standards of the time, able to fight but hardly a ship of the line. But that wasn't her job. The Nancy, under Captain Hugh Montgomery, was picking up guns and groceries. Among her cargo were 50 matchlock muskets, 62 hogsheads of sugar, and 101 of rum. Insert joke about Americans using absolutely any unit of measure that isn't the metric system. And most relevant to our story, 386 barrels of black powder, each of which typically weighed about 100 pounds. Now for a little visualization, this is what happens when you ignite 1 pound of black powder. The Nancy soon arrived at Delaware Bay with her cargo and crew of 11. But were prevented from proceeding any further by the blockade, which consisted of British vessels, Liverpool, Kingfisher, and Orpheus, and a combined total of 76 guns, versus the Nancy's 6. Lousy odds. So when the Brits spotted her on the afternoon of June 28th, she did the only reasonable thing. Nancy turned north and made a run for it. Meanwhile, Continental Navy under Captain Barry of the Lexington had been expecting Nancy's arrival, and when lookouts at Cape May spotted her, he tagged in the Reprisal under Captain Lambert Wicks and the Wasp under Captain William Halleck. Attempting to evade the enemy, Nancy made for Turtle Gut Inlet, what is now the beach of Wildwood. Since the writers decided that the plot needed to happen, a thick fog chose that time to descend on the Jersey shore, concealing Nancy from the pursuing British vessels. However, her luck ran out when she ventured too far into the shallows and ran aground. Seeing this, the Orpheus and Kingfisher kept a safe distance, from where they could now engage her at their convenience. The Nancy and her cargo seemed stranded. But fortunately for her, the Lexington, Wasp, and Reprisal soon closed, protected by the island and sent out longboats. There was still a way to salvage this operation. Approaching the Nancy, Captain Barry realized that it wasn't a super long row to shore, and so they started unloading the ship's cargo by hand, beginning with her store of black powder, allegedly. I mean, let's be real, this was a bunch of sailors with access to hundreds of gallons of rum. British, American, or what have you, a man's got priorities. Throughout the night, the men loaded the longboats and rowed the cargo to shore. In all, they were able to get 286 of the kegs from the stranded Nancy to the Cape May shore. I'll do the math for you. A bunch of guys in rowboats managed to move 14 tons of explosive material in the dark under fire. A valiant effort for sure, but by morning the Orpheus and Kingfisher were preparing to move in. Such as she was, the Nancy couldn't adjust her field of fire as well as she might have, and her two pursuers were essentially taking potshots without receiving any damage. The Nancy was. The morning of the 29th, Captain Barry makes a decision. There is no way to salvage the Nancy, and there was no time to offload the remaining 100 kegs of gunpowder. However, neither was there reason to let the Brits have her as a prize. Barry makes the order to pull one of the sails. Now I have to imagine what next transpires was preceded by a badass Captain Morgan moment where Barry personally bit the cork off one of the powder kegs, spit it out, and proceeded to pour the contents into the down sail. They rolled it up like a Cheech and Chong movie, dangling one end into the ship's hold. They had just made an oversized fuse to one hell of a firecracker. Now before lighting and running away, Barry had one of his men pull the ship's colors. Can't have that going up in smoke now, can we? However, the British mistakenly interpreted this action as the Nancy striking her colors, nautical parlance for surrender, and thought, "Oh, sweet, we just run a little brigantine as a prize." Captain Graham of the Kingfisher sent out his master's mate and 6 men on a longboat to accept the Nancy's surrender. But presumably, just as they climbed aboard, the ship's hold detonated. As the legend goes, the blast could be felt for miles. The Kingfisher's master's mate and all 6 sailors were killed in the blast, and the Nancy, along with her treasure, were soundly denied the enemy. The Battle of Turtle Gut Inlet was over. Captain Barry and his men were hailed as heroes for their ingenious resolution and heroics. Now, on the one hand, it is important to point out that perfidy, or false surrender, is in fact a war crime under the Geneva Checklist. I mean Geneva Convention. But on the other hand, no one ever said to come over, so whatever. Later, the town of Wildwood Crest would adopt a drawing of the ship in its town seal. Turtle Gut Inlet itself would be closed in 1922, as in filled in with sand by Cape May County, because valuable beach property is valuable beach property. And that's how we roll in Jersey. Today, the site is marked with a park, a modest but present reminder of its role in the conflict for independence. That'll about do it for me. If you stuck with me this far, thank you so much for watching. As usual, sources in the description. This has been Words and Coffee. Until next time.